is when we go, I work with a great guy who used to be an Olympic coach. And when we used to work together, he said, what do you want people to be talking about when they're driving home? It's a good thing, isn't it? It's a good one. What do you want people to be talking about when they're driving home? If you're driving on your own, talk to yourself or talk to God. But it's a good one. So, that's the sort of thing, really, is what's grabbed you. But just giving you a bit of chance to think about that, and those of you who are a bit bolder, maybe you could share what you're going to take away. Sometimes when you say it out loud, even if you say it to somebody close by, it helps you, especially if they then see you in a few weeks' time and say, how are you getting on with that? A bit risky, Any questions or comments from today? We've ranged, haven't we, quite a long way, but you look like you just about make it to 3 o'clock.
I think you've certainly given all of us a great deal of help.
Great.
And insight.
Yeah.
And to help us to ask the questions of ourselves, of our church, and of our community.
Yeah.
And to put Christ at the beginning of everything that you do.
Amen.
Before anything else.
Yeah.
I think that's.
And also, your use of Christ is really important. I've deliberately used Jesus in this talk, but of course, as we go through John's Gospel, we're going to be using Christ much more. And I think that quite a few people have said to me, oh, I think you should say Jesus Christ. I say, yeah, I should, but this bit of the story is all about Jesus, isn't it? And we have to be careful with the Trinitarian stuff and make sure we don't trip over it. But I think it's good that you said that, because actually you're right. I think putting Christ in the middle means that you know that the glorified one who there's another. I love Scripture. I love Scripture so much. The word anchor only appears twice in the New Testament. In Acts, when the boat is sinking and they're getting rid of as many anchors as they can at this point because they're so scared. But Paul has said it's okay. The only other time it turns up is in Hebrews, when it talks about Jesus being an anchor in heaven for us. It's like we're anchored to him. I love that. But that's the Christ. The Messiah, Jesus, intercedes for us. And he's there. And I think it's good. I'm glad you said that. You brought Christ in. And I with Jesus. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
It's just something I've been thinking about in the week. And you sort of confirmed it today that whereas, I was saying earlier, a small congregation of, we manage about 15, 20 if it's a good day, The church across the road from us, which is the Assemblies of God Church, they have a morning congregation of 300, and then just put out, it's gone on social media and put out a glossy brochure of a 10-year plan to basically double the size of their building for a bigger congregation. And I know that when our folks get to hear about that, they're going to be saying, oh, what are they doing, what's all this about? And it's been on my mind all week, and it's been just in my heart that I ain't really got to worry about what they're doing. No. I've got to worry about what we're doing. And if they need to have a bigger congregation, a bigger building because they've got 300 and they need more spaces, well, that's up to them. We haven't got to worry about that. They're not worrying about us. Yeah. That we have a good relationship with them. They share they're doing that because they share our building. Well, they don't share our building, they use our building. Yeah. When they've got a big
relay.
Building, but nothing else much. And we use their car park, so we haven't got to worry about it. We haven't got no car park. We've got place for lots of motorbikes and cars. But what you said today has confirmed it to me that all we've got to worry about is what we're doing in our fellowship and in our community, and what they're doing is between them and God, not between us, is it?
No, and you're a great Johannine scholar, because if you go to the end of John, of course, you find Jesus putting stuff right with Peter, and Peter's call, and then Peter says, yeah, well, what about him? Yeah. And Jesus, what's that got to do with you? What about him? Please hear me. If you keep planting, look, there's an exponential curve, right? You start making disciples. 1 makes 1, that's 2. 2 makes 4. 4 make 8. 8 makes 6. You do the maths, right? There's a crazy stat that if 3 people in this room set out to make a disciple every year, and when they made that disciple to teach that disciple how to make another one, it would be about 15 years or something, the whole world was converted. It's something like that. It's not right, but it's something like that. And of course, big churches, I've been a leader of a big church, and we get sucked into this, how many people have we got? You know, and God really pulled me up on this, because he said, actually, you've got about, we had a church, a numerical roll church of 400 or 500, okay? But my point was, if you called to action, if you said, we need to go on the estate and we need to get some leaflets out or whatever, you might get 15 people. Now, so who's committed? Now, who are you measuring? What are you measuring? What you measure, you do. That's the other thing. Now, you measure where you have influence or where you're planting stuff. If you plant a new thing, you will usually get non-Christian new people. If you put another service in a building, you won't get new people. You just get either transfer or, because it is it's a risk. But if you say, no, God's called us to do this, don't worry about everybody else. It's not worth it. I mean, it's threatening. But if they're good to you and kind to you, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you start doing some particular planting things, some of the people in that big church will say, actually, we'd quite like to be involved in that, because we like the worship, we like the gathering, it's good for me, and yeah, actually, do you know what you're doing is, so stick at it, yeah, stick small, because small, I said this at a big Church of England conference a couple of weeks ago, if we grow small, we'll build big, but if we try to build big, it's not really going to happen, yeah, so keep doing it, good, great, encourage you, yeah.
One of our questions that we had was
Yep.
an understandable question,
Yep.
but I think you've answered it, or we've answered it. Where would this church or one of our churches be in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking about your torch analogy.
Yeah.
That actually maybe we don't know what 10 years will look like.
No.
But let's just try and shine the torch.
Yeah.
Where we go. I'm not trying to say that it was the wrong question.
No.
But I think it's a sign of our fear, perhaps,
Yeah.
that we're like, what's going to happen? But we need to actually trust and take one step forward, maybe.
10 years ago,
Do the big one.
10 years ago, did you know you'd be here?
No.
Right, so you don't know 10 years. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan, but you don't know. But do you know what you're called to? Do you know who you're called to? Do you know what to focus on? And, there is a danger when we have so much stuff. If we don't have much stuff, it's not too difficult to go where we're supposed to go. But when we have stuff, it's quite difficult. I don't just mean buildings. I mean also, jobs and careers and family and, I remember Lewis Palau saying in 1978, saying, it was a student conference, and he said, listen, while you're students, listen to God carefully, because all you own is a T-shirt and a pencil. He said, so, you might as well say to God, I'll give you everything. He said, but if you wait 5-6 years, you'll have to give him a car, maybe a partner, maybe a child, maybe a house, maybe a career. So, and being Lewis Palau, you want everybody to be an evangelist there and then, and I think we all stood up. But, yeah, you don't know, but you do know who you trust in. And you do know that he is faithful, and he's going to keep moving as well. He's just going to keep moving. There's a great Welsh poet, what's he called? Not Dylan Thomas, R.S. Thomas, who wrote some really dour poetry. He said, he's Christian. He said, such a fast God, always leaving when we turn up. And it's like, it's a great line, isn't it? You think you got there, don't you? Think you got there? Oh, he's moved. Jesus is moving on. Yeah.
Recently, Michael Headley, what's his title? Spiritual coordinator. He sent out prayer requests.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really highlighted, or perhaps it just jumped out at me, was the need for preachers, and how many churches don't have regular preachers who can, take part in a service. But also how there's more training needed on the general theme of leadership.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just think it's something that we need to pray about.
Yeah.
Because our God's an exciting God.
Yeah, yeah.
And he always leads us onwards.
Yeah.
And there is just so much more to come, I feel, perhaps out of this group, but other groups
Yeah.
alongside us,
Yeah.
that will perhaps change the spiritual dynamics.
Let's stay in for a bit longer.
Yeah, in the church. We're in Yorkshire.
Ah, yeah, of course. Leader is a plural word. And we don't do ourselves any favours by putting on a pedestal a leader who we all say they've got to do it. In fact, the Church of England, what usually happens is they end up falling. You know, they seriously do. I mean, we pick them up nearly every week. They either burn out or they get into a bit of sin that they never thought they'd be in. And we've seen it across the world, haven't we, in the last year? It's really sad. And that's because we create hero leaders. Leadership, or plural leader, means that we share it together. And so you talk about the gift of teaching or preaching or evangelism or prophecy or church grow, apostles, whatever, pastors. And actually, I think that, to be fair, I think the nonconformist churches are generally better at this, are generally better at sharing and inviting. And you know, the Church of England is, you know, has been for years intent on priestly ministry, where the priest does everything. I mean, it's the same as the Catholic Church, isn't it? But I think certainly most of my work is done with leaders and teams, and part of that is helping them knock the edges off each other, because, you know, sadly everybody's not like me, you know. Or maybe you turn that round the other way. So I think it is a need. And I think the other thing is that lots of churches, I feel, are giving themselves a hard time because generally they're elder or older. I wouldn't be too worried about that right now, mainly because Moses was about 80 when God got hold of him. But also I think that there's a great verse, isn't there, in Joel, where it says, the old men will dream dreams and the young men will have visions. And I think it's our responsibility, if we're older, to make their vision our dreams, rather than, because we can dream about, oh, it used to be like this, it's like that. But actually, if you talk to young people, and I'm talking about leaders in their, you know, late 20s, 30s, who I literally grab hold of, because I don't want them to get done in by the system and the other leaders. I want to help them work out where they're going, and I want to hear their visions, and I want to start dreaming about that. So, you know, you talk about 10 years' time. We don't know, but it could be a bunch of people, young people, who've got a vision, and we'll go, oh, you probably don't want to do that. That's a bit risky. You probably don't want to. But actually, you know, you took risk. We took risks back whenever we took risks. We wouldn't be here today if we hadn't taken risks. And so we have to encourage people to take risks and say, you know, I sometimes say to God, you know, because I say, oh, you know, I'm going on holiday, God, will you be okay while I'm gone? You know. It's ridiculous. But we do that. We actually think, you know, vicars particularly, a week before they go on holiday, they don't sleep because they do everything they can for when they're going to be on holiday. When they come back, they do everything they should have done while they're away. What are they doing? I think God's not able to manage his own world, you know.
But Abraham set out not knowing where he was going.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the visionary is. And Abraham didn't know he was a visionary. And I think that's the good thing. But he just followed God where God was leading
Yeah.
him into. And yes, that's scary. It's
Yeah.
very scary.
Yeah.
But if we're not following God, who are we following?
Well, we're all following somebody. You know, disciples, it's not just a Christian church that makes disciples. I mean, you know, Gary Barlow's quite good at it. You know, Liverpool Football Club's quite good at it. You're a rugby league thing, aren't you, fan? You know, they're quite good at it. Wigan and St Helens in equal amounts. You know, we're all making disciples. So, where do we want to get that focused? You know. Any other comments, questions? Yes, young lady at the back.
You said there were 3 I's, incarnation,
Yes.
invitation, and I didn't get the last one.
Implication.
Oh, thank you.
What's the implication? That's where we got to. Thank you. You brought me all the way around. What's the implication So I was supposed to, if I'd stuck to it. In John 3, I was looking at revelation of God, the revelation of who Jesus is, the recognition of Jesus by Nicodemus, and the realization that we need to be birthed from above. That was what I would have done if I'd done a proper sermon. But but the implication is the big one, really. What does this mean? What does this mean?
It means there's hope for tomorrow.
Absolutely. So there is. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Great.
And 10,000 for signs.
What have we done with the good old hymns, eh? See, I'm a bit grumpy in my church because we sing these amazingly good stuff. I have to say it's good, but I'm thinking, can we just sing, a decent hymn? And they look at me and they go, "You're very old." I go, "Yeah, I am." I mean, Sue and I are very privileged that we're in a new church plant, and our Connect group, they call them. I used to call them home groups, if you remember. Our Connect group, because we're supposed to connect with people around us, is made up of mainly people under 30. And they're younger than our children. So, that's a real privilege. And I know a lot of us would go, "Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that." But sometimes you have to put yourself in a place. It's uncomfortable. I don't like the service. It's not my kind of church. But boy, people are coming to faith. And while I'm looking at, I'm watching people coming in and coming to know Jesus. And there's me, grumpy old bloke in the corner, going, "Why can't we sing a hymn?" Fortunately, the leader who I mentor says to me, "We're going to have to help you out, aren't we?" Because these hymns are great. They're fantastic, and they've taught us a lot. Hymns have taught us. I mean, Wesley, come on. I mean, if we didn't have, and don't forget when both of them, when they wrote those hymns, they weren't adopted, were they? They were like ostracised. Now, Church of England holds a big parade for Her Majesty, and we sing a Wesleyan hymn. Yeah. Did anybody notice? I nearly said, "Oh, there you go." Yeah.
I've always had one saying, whenever I've met anyone and they say, about religion or what you are, the one thing I've always said is, it's God that loves you and there's no labels in heaven.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they go, "What?"
Mm.
I say, "God loves you and there's no labels in heaven."
Yeah.
And the best one that came to me, I was in Marks and Spencer's, and a woman was going to go down the escalator with a shopping truck full for Christmas. "I hate Christmas," she says.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, "Well, why don't you put it all back and come to church with me on Christmas morning?"
What did she do?
Yeah. "What?" I said, "That's what it's all about."
Yeah, well done. Well
And
done.
another lady behind me then starts to tell him all about Jesus as I walked on.
Great story. Yeah, you see, I told you God's tricky. You see, there's a lady in Asda who, somebody who was really suffering with some pain, and she plucked up courage and said, "Could I say a prayer for you?" She said, "Well, I don't pray." She said, "No, but I do. Could I say a prayer for you?" And she's probably another version of you, So she did say the prayer. And this lady said, "You know what? I feel a bit better." So this lady said, "Well, let me pray again." Again. She says, "That's really good." And one of the store assistants, true story, one of the store assistant comes round and says, and this lady said to her, "Let me tell you what's just happened." A bit like John 4. "Let me tell you what's just happened." So she gives testimony. The person who's been prayed for gives testimony to the lady that is sick. Anyway, this lady says, "Well, I've actually got a bit of back pain myself, you see." So she says, "Well, can I pray for you?" Anyway, eventually what happens is this lady from the shop gets on the microphone and says, "If anybody's interested, there's a lady in the shop who's praying for people if they're not feeling very well." Well, you don't know, do you? You don't know. I'm not saying that revival broke out in Asda or Marks and Spencer. What I'm saying is sometimes, and when we hear those stories, we love them. But if somebody says, "Oh, I was in church the other day and I met Maggie and, she's not been very well. We said a prayer. It was lovely." Great. I mean, please, Maggie. But it hasn't actually wowed you, has it? It's just nice. And nice is such a... I think they write nice on those biscuits because they're not nice. Are they? Come on, be honest. They're not nice. If you serve them in your church, get rid of them. Right? They're not nice. But sometimes we're just too nice. And sometimes we have to say it as it is. And sometimes we, so... Okay, so just think for a moment. What's your takeaway? What is the thing that you're going to take away that... I mean, you might have heard something that was you hadn't heard before, or it might have cemented something. But I'm really saying, if Jesus is saying, look what's going on where you are, what are you going to take away? Maybe, if you're really bold, just where you were in your groups, you don't have to call it out. Maybe just, if you tell somebody what you're going to take away, it makes it a little bit more real. We don't have to do it in the whole group, but maybe just for 3 minutes, get into your little groups, if you can still remember where you are. Just say, if you can, if you can't, if it's too personal, you don't want to say, just say, I don't want to take. But, I think it'll encourage you as well if somebody shares with you as well. So just for a few minutes, do that.